My name is Melanie Brummer, and I'm the founder of the Upcycledclothcollective. And a topic that we look at quite often as an admin team in the Upcycledclothcollective is greenwashing. And that is essentially where a corporate designs a marketing campaign around a social or environmental cause. And the campaign is actually designed to sell more commercial product. So very often these campaigns give customers the sense that this corporate is doing a good thing, and it creates a softer sentiment in customers around for the corporate, where people say, oh, well, they're doing this great thing. And yet when you scratch the surface, you find that what they're actually doing is just marketing more of their mass-produced product. So an example might be a corporate business that sells mass-produced clothing. They have a kiosk in their store where they encourage you to bring in your clothing for upcycling and recycling. Everybody thinks they're doing a great thing, but you don't know where that clothing is actually going. How is it actually being upcycled? How is it being recycled? Who does it benefit? And is it really doing what it's supposed to do? So if we're bringing in clothing for recycling, we're trying to reduce the amount of clothing in the waste stream. Now, if you're doing that in the middle of a retail store that's selling mass-produced clothing, you're not in any way reducing the global impact of fast fashion. You're actually putting a marketing spin on it that gives people like a misconception about what you're actually doing. So in our Upcycledclothcollective admin team, we very often speak about companies that are doing this. Very often people approach us and say to us, well, why aren't you using brand partnerships to monetize what you're doing, to support the sustainability of the work that you're doing in the group? And the reality is that most of the corporates that we could partner with in that way do not have everything in place to be able to say they really are doing something that is benefiting the environment or even society in the bigger scheme of things. Very often these clothing companies are making use of what really is virtual slave labor to produce these garments. So any clothing that's mass-produced and is cheap to buy is going to fall into that category where the ethics of manufacturing are a little bit murky and muddy. So you'd have to ask the particular business, and I actually think that would be a great way to go about getting corporates to think differently about how they apply these things. If their customers start to probe more deeply, how are you doing this? Where's this really going? I think it would not only push them, but also inspire them to do better. I think very often they do it, so that when a business greenwashes like that, they're not doing it with evil intent. The marketing team comes up with something that really does have some kind of a small social impact. But it's getting people to focus on one small issue here when the bigger picture here is not being served. And it's when customers start to probe and ask questions and investigate and interrogate more, I think that corporates will be forced to do more and just to be more rigorous in how they do things. I would be very wary of anything that claims to be a quick fix of any kind. So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Another good way to assess it is to look at the bigger picture. You know, so here we've got a micro picture, but what's happening on the macro? So what does this look like globally? So yes, maybe we're serving a small local orphanage, but if we are on the other end mass producing large quantities of garments that end up in landfill without being sold because they're overruns, and our labor force is not being paid fairly, then it doesn't matter if they're helping an orphanage with some clothing here. Many of them might also say, well, we're recycling these clothes. I would find out how they're recycling them. Because what I know about recycling clothing is, up until very, very recently, it was impossible to recycle mixed fiber garments. And most of the garments that you buy these days have got some kind of a fiber mix in them. So while it's possible to put all cottons through a process and get another cotton out the other side, when you've got very mixed fibers that have got polyesters and acrylics and all sorts of different things in, it becomes much harder to upcycle those textiles. So I would also interrogate on that basis, find out, ask the question, how is this being upcycled? Who's upcycling it? Where is it going? So what very often happens is a customer will walk up to this kiosk, hand in their old denims, and make the assumption that the denims are being reused to make the new garments that are there on the shelf. And that assumption is entirely the consumer's. So the store hasn't done anything wrong. But that assumption is also not necessarily what's going on. So sometimes what happens is that clothing that is being handed in for upcycling is being converted into maybe something like insulation for housing, or bricks or something like that. I've even heard recently about studies where they're looking at using textile waste to fill potholes. So textile waste is being used in a number of different ways, but what happens is that there's an assumption sometimes from the customer. So that when they walk in the store, they think, okay, this is being converted into that. So it is worth investigating further and just asking the question, going into the store and saying, okay, you are upcycling these. How are you upcycling them? Where are they ending up? And can we see some sort of a written report? Because if any big corporate is doing any genuine work like that, then they should be reporting on it. And you should be able to get some statistics and some figures out of them.